Senator Ward, you have 8 minutes.
Gurmaga the Laoghaire-Rathdown, and I want to second the motion number 1 that's before the House. I think there are 2 words that have particularly featured in the course of this debate, and they are compassion and discretion. And that is perhaps the most important way that we can approach this very sensitive issue. And in that regard, I have to absolutely support the aims behind this bill. I think it's an entirely meritorious matter to bring that before the House. And I can see the circumstances behind the decision of the senators to sponsor this bill. It's an important bill, and I support the aims behind it. Coming back to those 2 issues, compassion being the first one, both Senators Higgins and Ruane particularly mentioned a number of cases, and any one of those cases I think would cause anybody to think twice about whether we should be deporting anybody from this country, because that whole process, the whole process involved in that causes hurt, it causes upset, it causes massive anguish amongst the people who are the subject of it. And there's no doubt about it that it causes harm to those people. It doesn't mean, though, however, we should never deport people, and I don't think the senators are saying that either. There are, of course, cases where it is necessary to carry out deportations and remove people from the state, even in circumstances where there is an emotional and on the face of it, good reason why it shouldn't happen. But in terms of compassion, I think it's very important that what the Minister said is taken into account in that regard. And the word that's used in the government motion is pragmatic, and that is also important, because the compassion must be applied in a pragmatic fashion if the system is to function at all. And I think as we debate this issue, we know that there are major flaws of the system. For anybody coming into this country, be it a migrant worker, be it somebody seeking the protection of this country under the International Protection Office, be it somebody who is, in whatever circumstance, coming to this country, officialdom is a difficult hurdle for them to negotiate. And I've been contacted by any number of people who have been delayed, particularly because of delays as a result of COVID, in getting their stamps renewed, getting their visas renewed, getting their work permits renewed. It's a problem across the system. In fact, in contemplation of this debate, I contacted one person, somebody who lives not very far away from me, Laoghaire-Rathdown, who is engaged to a foreign national, Jatinder Singh, and had been in contact with me a number of months ago. He was the subject of a deportation order and had appealed that order, and they were contacting me with a view to trying to ascertain when a decision would be made by the Minister's office in respect of that order. Now, I contacted Orla today to ask her if it was okay to mention her case in the House today, and I received the very happy news that they had received an email from their solicitor today saying that appeal has been successful and that deportation order has been lifted. So I want to put on record, first of all, my thanks to the Minister in that regard. But I hope that is also indicative of the approach that her office takes to these issues. That looking at this, a functional, employed, decent person from another country who's come here, has put down roots here, exactly the same situations that have been mentioned by other senators, built a relationship with an Irish national and wants to stay here, it's entirely appropriate that he should be allowed to, even if there are good reasons why he might be otherwise deported. But the fact that the Minister has stepped in that circumstance and undone the deportation, I hope, is an indication of the approach that her office takes of these. And I think that is also indicated by what she said in the context of her contribution to the debate as well. So it's a very important element of the compassion aspect of this. But with compassion, we must also remember that hard cases make bad law. And we cannot make decisions on whether or not deportations should take place on the basis of the cases where they probably shouldn't. And the cases have been outlined. I think it's reasonable to suggest that these are definitely cases where a question mark arises. And I would encourage the Minister, as I know she will, to look at them with a kind, compassionate eye, the very one that she's been speaking about in terms of her contribution. But the pragmatism and the discretion that these houses afford to the Minister for Justice of the day to make these orders is tremendously important. The houses of the Oireachtas have delegated the function to the Minister for Justice of making decisions in respect of deportation orders with good reason. It would be entirely impractical for these houses, for example, to be making decisions on any individual application. And nobody's suggesting that we should, both from a minister's perspective, but also simply because these matters should be outside the realm of politics. They should be judged on their merits, and the same compassion that we've talked about should be applied to them. That's tremendously important. The notion, however, that we would now step in, notwithstanding the good intentions of this bill, and remove that discretion from the Minister, I have a problem with that. And it is tremendously important, I think, that we afford the Minister the trust and confidence of the Oireachtas in allowing her to exercise her discretion to make these orders where it is appropriate and where the compassion of the situation has not overcome the reason behind the deportation order. And I have to say that in regard to this motion or this private member's bill, I have great confidence that Minister McEntee has the capacity, the compassion and the understanding to make the right decisions in respect to those matters when the time comes. If I might also just make reference to Section 5 of the bill, which says that the ban would also be in place for 3 months after the emergency period. I think that is a difficulty also in terms of not just the removal of the discretion, but the removal of discretion after we have come out, and we all look forward to the day after we have come out of the COVID pandemic. Again, that's not the stumbling block, but it's just an issue that I would draw the House's attention to. What is a stumbling block to me is the removal of the discretion, and essentially a notion where if we were to pass this bill, we are saying that we no longer trust the Minister to have discretion in these matters, when in fact, to my mind, all the cases that I've dealt with, and I just mentioned one, I am aware, for example, of one of my colleague councillors in South Dublin, Baby Parappadam, who has brought a number of cases to my attention of people who maybe are waiting for the Garda National Bureau of Immigration to, Garda National Immigration Bureau to put in place renewals of stamps and things like that. There are lots of foreign nationals living in this country who have been massively delayed in progressing these applications. Many of these I would already have brought to the Minister's attention. But that is a problem with the process as well. But the notion that we would there, in the context of those applications, remove the discretion from the Minister, to my mind, to be a mistake. It's tremendously important that the legislation, the Immigration Act and the other piece of legislation that have delegated this function, they must remain in place. And I come back to what I said at the very start. The two governing principles in this must be compassion and discretion. We've heard about compassion. The Minister, and I think Senator Higgins in her opening statement in respect to this bill, expressed concern that she didn't have assurances from the Minister in respect to this. I hope that she has now received them. They can't be binding assurances insofar as that is another way in which we remove the discretion from the Minister. But I think what the Minister has said in her speech is very clearly an indication that she understands the importance of applying a discretionary approach to these matters when there are appeals, when there are orders that she's asked to make, that she looks at them and she outlined the criteria that are considered by her office. So that compassion, I have confidence, is there, but then I would also say that discretion must be there. And the motion that is brought forward by the government, and it refers to the number of deportations that haven't been affected over the last number of months, and I think it's welcome that for all the reasons that have been outlined by other senators that we consider that. But that discretion is tremendously important because it cuts both ways. It's not just a discretion to deport, it's also a discretion not to deport. So we must trust in the Minister to have that compassion, and we must trust to give her that discretion. Come on.